It's time for another video. 20 years of Cadmus continues this month. If you haven't seen my last video yet, go watch me make Question and Lex, and then come back to see the main subject of Question's first investigation, Galatea, and Lex's business partner, Amanda Waller. Let's look at Supergirl's clone first. The simplicity of making Galatea all comes down to choosing the correct parts to make things easier for yourself. I went through many versions of her to try and get her to look right while also being the most economical using leftover parts. I ended up settling on TNBA Poison Ivy's head for the stern face, BTAS Catwoman's torso and arms for the size, and Roxy Rocket's legs for the boots. I thought about using Supergirl's torso, but Galatea is supposed to be an aged up version of Kara, so I made her a little beefier. We have our parts, so let's start on modifications. The first thing that needs to go is her belt. I mentioned using the right parts, and a bonus of using this Catwoman is that you can keep her main buckle piece and then Dremel off the rest of the belt. Next, we need to completely remove Pamela's unique shell hair. I've done this a couple of times now, and the best way I've discovered is snapping off that hair curl and then splitting it open from there. I forgot to mention that I'm using the fist hands from a Gods and Monsters Wonder Woman figure because of the gloved look, and because I wanted her to look angrier with the clenched fists. For those to work, we need to Dremel into the wrists really quick and then test fit them. The main Dremeling portion is done, so we can head into sculpting now. Sometimes you'll see me sketch onto a figure before sculpting to get a better idea of how it'll look before I start. Here I'm drawing her collar line and then the details on her chest. Mix up equal parts of epoxy and press on a ring around her neck. Smooth it down on the bottom to really blend it in and make that line disappear. Move down to her wrists to form the shapes of her glove cuffs. Similar to the collar but easier, push a ring around the wrists, but this time flare out one end and then push in a couple of wrinkles with your sculpting tool. The next step will be evening out her belt to square off all the way around. She has two more circles on either side of the main buckle too. The central one will be Catwoman's original, and we'll sculpt the other two on either side of it. I'll move back to her chest and sculpt that oval opening and smear it out to erase the seam addition. I'll move up to her head now to give her some much needed hair. Since her bob hangs down in the front on both sides, I don't want that breaking in the future, so I'll sculpt it with the more flexible green stuff. After it cures, I'll add the main portion of her hair with standard epoxy. Using both lets me save the more expensive green stuff for other things. One more thing I noticed is that Catwoman's gloves still have lines at her biceps from where they ended. I'll erase those not with a Dremel but with more epoxy. Mix up a tiny amount and push it into the crack all the way around, then smear it out to blend it in. That covers the sculpting, but you'll want to Dremel or sand down anything that was sculpted too thick. For me, I refine the overall shape of the hair and then slim down the glove cuffs before priming and embracing painting. I don't prime with dyes or colors anymore these days, but for Galatea it just made sense to prime her with white and then paint on top of that. For those paints, she only needs a peach, a gold, a black, and a red for her lips and blue for her eyes. I'll start with the peach on her legs, and then on her torso, her neck, and her face. Move down to paint her belt gold and then use that same color on her hair. Her face needs black line details, red on her lipstick, and blue dots for eyes. And that's really it for her. She was a pretty quick custom and turned out really great. I'll naturally be posing her to face off against Supergirl, so here's how that will look. Okay, from Galatea we move on to one of her creators, Amanda Waller. Amanda Waller's recipe was a tough one to nail down. Due to her unique stature, I wasn't quite sure where to get the right parts for her while staying within this DC Collectibles line. All of the shorter, stockier characters in this line tend to be male, and even then no one really matches her form. I settled on Mad Hatter's torso due to the width of his shoulders and decided to swap out Hatter's long forearms with much shorter ones from the BTAS Riddler in order to get her arm proportions right. For a while I was going to use Talia's legs and thicken up the calves until it hit me. I was looking at some loose Green Lantern legs while trying to figure out how to use them when I saw just how thick his calves were. I could secure those up into her top half and then cover any weirdness with her skirt. Perfect! Later on I'm going to swap out her hands for TNBA Riddler's hands since they're gloveless and a little thicker, but I thought I'd mention it in the recipe portion too. Now for her head. Going through my spare heads I came across Jason Todd. He has a similar face shape and a decent sour pout. Not bad. Too small. How about Maxi Zeus? His eyes are more properly spaced apart and his head is bigger. It's a weird one, but I started going with it. Midway through dremeling, I was given an idea and some help from an unexpected friend. But more on that in a bit. For now, I'm going to see how Maxi can fare in modifications. The first thing we'll want to remove is Mad Hatter's coat. Heat it up and try to rip out the rubber inserts that are gluing it in place. Next, I mentioned swapping forearms, so heat Hatter's up and then heat up a BTAS Riddler. This is actually a decent swap for Riddler too, because his arms seem a tad short for his body as is. If you're familiar with my videos, you'll know that I have other plans for that mix in the future. Back to Hatter. You'll want to remove his inner waist cap and dremel way up into his torso in order to fit Green Lantern's legs in there. Speaking of the legs, I'll dremel the thighs down a little to ensure that the thickness of the skirt won't prevent them from fitting in there. You'll also want to dremel the lantern boots off so the legs can look bare. John Stewart's feet are weirdly long and thin, so we'll need to trim them down since Waller is short and has smaller feet. The last bit of dremeling needed will be giving Maxi Zeus a shave. I notice his hairpiece looks to be added on, so I'll heat up his head and remove the hair. Now for his beard. I'll disc dremel the silly protrusions and then switch to a normal dremel for bigger areas and then down to the little one for details around his mouth. Lastly, back to the standard one to smooth things out around the nose. Once the heating, swapping, and dremeling are done, we can start sculpting. Firstly, I'll mix up some epoxy and press it into the odd shapes left over from the coat getting removed. Second, I'll thicken up Jervis's biceps and then come down and cover up Edward's shirt cuffs that are sticking out. Now it's time to start shaping Amanda's torso. She has a fairly large chest, so I'll start with the first layer to form that right. The second layer will go up over her torso and get a more proper slope for her shoulders. Next up, her jacket piece is actually longer than her arms, so I'll wrap some epoxy around the bottom and pull down on it all the way until it looks right. The first layer is dry enough to refine, so I'll dremel that a bit on her torso and arms and then add some more on her sides. I'll do one more layer of epoxy before adding the clotheslines, but I'll sketch it out first to be sure. I'll sculpt a bridge on the front to smooth out the coat better and then let that dry. Now we can add the shirt layer and let that dry, and then add the shapes of the inside of her coat. A couple more rounds of dremeling and layers of sculpting, and then I add her necklace. I'm using a thin piece of plastic from what you usually find on clothing tags because it's the perfect thickness for the main band. Glue it on there and then shape and add 3 balls to the front of the necklace to hide the seam of the 2 ends of the band coming together. I haven't really mentioned the legs in a while. To complete the leg transformation, we'll need to sculpt on some high heels. I'll roll up a small amount of epoxy and then push it on around the foot. Then add the bit on the back for her heel and push it down very lightly to ensure she'll be able to stand flat on the heel. It's at this point that the unexpected help for her head arrived. I want to give a massive thank you to Casimir.inanimate.objects on Instagram for this really excellent print of an Amanda Waller head from a digital statue he purchased. Kaysen scaled it perfectly, and it made me realize I needed to actually slim her down some more to fit it all together correctly. For her skirt, I'll be using some of my sheet rubber, and it should be able to just work from a rectangle to form the tube. To test the shape, I like to start with a paper prototype so I don't waste any of the rubber material on rounds of trial and error. Measure out the size for her skirt by holding up the paper and making a mark. Once you're good with that, cut it out and trace it onto the rubber sheet. I'm using a little thicker piece to help match the width and hold the legs in place. If that shape still works and doesn't need any additional trimming, you can glue the ends together and wait for it to dry. Now to attach her head, I'll use these magnets, one in the head and one in the rest of her neck. This will keep her head on very well and still allow it to turn, as long as the magnets are properly aligned parallel to each other. Okay, I think we're ready to prime and paint her. Amanda will need 7 colors on her. Brown for the skin, a light colored shirt, a bluish purple for the rest of her outfit and shoes, black and white for her hair and other little details, a turquoise ring, and a color for her fingernail polish and lipstick shine. I'll start with some Testor's Dull Coat to prime. Let that dry and go straight to this brown since her skin is the bottom layer of what needs to be painted on her torso. Next will be her light blue shirt, followed by her bluish purple jacket piece and skirt. Carry the brown and blue onto her legs and shoes. Then finish up with the black hair, eye whites, lipstick, fingernails, ring, and facial details. One more thing, for buttons to get that little black outline on them, I'll put down some black followed by that bluish purple. I'll be using this wonderful acrylic marker suggested by CrispyToys22 here on YouTube. I found a short from him where he used this marker to detail a new 52 Superman figure and it turned out great. Check him out. Anyway, I'll use it on her buttons and then to make the slight clothing detail black lines on her skirt and jacket. And with that, she's all done. You may remember from my Cadmus Plex video that I mentioned I'll be posing he and Waller together, toasting to their successes, so here they are. Looking pretty great recreating the end scene from the episode Clash. And now both pairs of figures all together. My Cadmus storyline recreation is coming along really well. That's all for today's video. Thanks for watching. Drop a like if you enjoyed it and subscribe for more monthly content like this and occasional shorts featuring tips or additional customs. Follow me on Instagram if you want to see more customs like these and all of my newest art. Join me next time for a mega-sized video featuring all of the remaining members of the Royal Flush Gang from Batman Beyond. That's right, we'll look at King, Queen, Ace, and Jack all in one video. Hurry on over to my catalog of other videos while you impatiently wait for the next one. Have a good one and happy customizing.